My name is Chris Holleran. I am the clinical director and training director at Queer Life Space in San Francisco. So we are a small grassroots nonprofit queer mental health agency. We service primarily individuals from the LGBT, QQIA2S+ communities. However, we also do have clients who identify as straight or heterosexual, although they're smaller in number. We provide individual, group, family, although we don't get a huge request for that, and couples services. We are located in the Castro neighborhood of San Francisco, where we just turned 10, so it's our 10-year anniversary in July. And we have a pretty diverse client demographic in terms of intersectionality of identities within the queer community and kind of sort of sub-communities within the queer community. One interesting fact about Queer Life Space is that we don't have any contracts with the city of San Francisco. So we rely solely on our sliding scale fee for service and then fundraising and donors, and then keeping our overhead costs low, which is how we're able to kind of break away from city funding. And one of the reasons that we've done that is because we can really tailor our services more for the client, so we can be more client centered in the way that we approach services. And then also we can see clients from anywhere in the Bay Area. They don't have to be San Francisco residents, since they're not San Francisco city contracts, which increases the diversity of the clients that we see at the clinic. In terms of and there was a question around like the philosophy of service provision of the clinic, I believe. Yeah. So again, our services are client-centered, strength-based services. We don't have an overarching theoretical orientation at the clinic because we bring so many associates and trainees from different backgrounds into the agency to provide services through different ways of formulating cases and implementing interventions. Also, that's true for the supervisors that we have coming in providing the supervision, and then also for the trainers who come in and provide our trainings as well. And this has been really great because it's a real sort of melting pot of ideas and a way for people to share different ways of working with clients. Because if you get, I don't know, if you're a clinician, you know that sometimes if you are holding on tightly to any one way of working, sometimes you can get a bit stuck. But then also, it's great for our client base as well because they have a lot of choices in terms of who they work with and the style of therapy that that's being administered. So we've had to reluctantly switch over from a paper-based charting system to a online charting system. So trainees do, in addition to providing clinical services, they do begin to do intake assessments with clients where they will set fee for service, and they also collect fee for service through our online documentation and billing system. So that's an aspect of the clinical work at Queer Life Space that sometimes is different, or one different aspect from other community mental health programs is the setting and collection of fee, which is something that you often don't have to do if you're seeing clients through a city contract. So in addition to that, there would be maintenance of documentation for services, and attending trainings, attending supervision, individual and group weekly are both provided. There's also a trainee staff meeting that is weekly that happens prior to our 2-hour didactic training every week. And that's really just a meeting for us to process anything that's not being covered in supervision. Sometimes there's issues that are logistic relating to our software or the office itself that are coming up. Sometimes there's other issues that are brought up in that meeting, but it's also a place for us to get to know each other better and for the trainees to feel more comfortable with me bringing up issues as they occur. And then also some client assignment might happen during that meeting as well. In addition to that, we offer opportunities, although I wouldn't say they're required, for trainees to become more involved with learning about what it takes to run a nonprofit and also to connect with the queer community as well. For example, the Castro Street Fair just happened this last weekend, and we're a beneficiary most years, and we need volunteers to work that fair. And so it's a great way for trainees to connect with the community and to see what it's like to be a beneficiary as a nonprofit at that event. And those opportunities happen throughout the course of the practicum year. And again, they're not required, but they're available. Unfortunately have to maintain a wait list for services, and it's gotten quite lengthy over the course of the pandemic. There's just the need far outweighs the availability of services, I think, for most communities right now. So we are, individuals find out about Queer Life Space from a lot of different avenues. Sometimes that's through other agencies in the city of San Francisco or the East Bay that know about us, and sometimes those agencies are providing services specifically to the community, like the Pacific Center in the East Bay, or like Lyric or Lion Martin Health Services here in San Francisco. Sometimes they're more clinically adjacent agencies that are referring clients to us, like the LGBT Community Center, or some other agencies within the city. Sometimes we're referred clients through private practitioners who can't offer a low enough sliding scale in their own private practices to see specific clients. But I think mostly it's word of mouth is how we get clients interested in our services, or clients who have received services at our agency before, and then are coming back to do another treatment episode. And those are really exciting ways when we are referred, like through like family and friends of prior clients, or when clients come back. I feel it's a real endorsement of the agency and the services that we're providing. So that's really exciting for us. And then in terms of what happens then, we have some screener questions that we have clients fill out. We want to figure out sort of the acuity of the situation and what services they're looking for, just to make sure that we're the right fit. And if they are going on a wait list, that we're giving them referrals for other places to look for help where they might be able to find it in a more timely fashion than if they're on our wait list. So that's been something that we've been really working to make more robust, is our referral and resources list that we can give to clients who are being put on our wait list for services. So within the screener questions themselves, there are questions about therapist preference. And so that's one of the first places that we're looking in terms of how we pair potential clients up with clinicians. We through the orientation process, we get an idea of what clinicians' identity markers are and what populations they want to really be working with at the agency, and then worked along with what the client is asking for in terms of therapist identification to pair them up that way. And then also availability comes in as a factor in there as well. So, but before we even start taking clinician or clients off of the wait list, we usually have transfer clients that we assign from previous clinicians from the prior year. And this year we tried something different, which was we got some bios from the incoming clinician group and shared it with the outgoing clinician group. And then they got to make suggestions for referrals for their clients that were being transferred to the new group based on the bios that they read about the incoming group of practicum students. And that seemed to work out pretty well. So I think that that's something that we're going to continue to do moving forward. Typical caseload, we're looking at that 10-hour marker. We don't want to overwhelm anyone, however, and so we build up to that marker over time. And if a trainee is feeling, overwhelmed with what they're doing, we're not going to give them more to do, even if they're not at that 10 clinical hours mark. But I'd say that, probably a typical caseload might look like, maybe 7 individuals and a couple, and then a group, because a group counts for 2 clinical hours. We do have clinicians who are very motivated to get as many hours that are supervised as possible. So they might tack on a group in addition to like 10 individuals or couples, just so they're making up for any no-shows or cancellations that might happen per week, so that they're hitting as close to that number of 10 as possible every week. But those are, that's a typical type of trainee who's really working to get as many hours as possible. And then there's other trainees who have other, life circumstances that might be taxing on them from a time and energy perspective. So we're willing to be flexible and work with the trainee around their caseload and their individual needs and limitations. But a typical caseload probably looks like 7 individuals, a couple, and a group. Right, so we have the 2-hour group supervision, and then an hour of individual supervision that's provided per week. Access to me, all the practicum students get my cell phone number, so they can call me if they are having emergencies or clinical issues and they can't get a hold of their either individual supervisor or group supervisor. And then we have the weekly trainee staff meeting, which is also a form of supervision. The group supervision happens on Thursday mornings from 10 to noon. And then Friday mornings would be the other required time, where we have our trainee staff meeting followed by our 2-hour didactic training. And the supervision is structured, from cohort to cohort. The group supervision might change in its structure from year to year, depending on what the cohort feels that they need out of group supervision. But right now it's usually, any sort of emergency issues that are coming up are dealt with first. And then clinicians that want to talk about clients more in depth for that particular week are given are allotted time from the 2-hour group supervision to do so. And then with the individual supervision, the structure of that will change from supervisor to supervisor and pairing to pairing. And one of the things that we do over the summer, after we have our cohort picked for the following training year, is we send out a supervisor match form. Our individual supervisors are volunteers from the community. They're clinicians that we've known, the administrators have known at the agency. Sometimes there are new supervisors that are interested in supervising that come and approach us to be volunteer supervisors. And now also, because we've been around for 10 years, we have folks that have been through the training program themselves who are able to supervise incoming trainees. So on that form, we ask the incoming practicum students if what they're looking for in terms of an individual supervisor, in terms of theoretical orientation or areas of expertise. And then we pair them up using that form and who we have available on any given year. And then also the supervision requirements for the trainee themselves, because certain trainees need certain supervisors with specific qualifications. So those are some ways that we do those pairings. The training is, they're mostly didactic trainings, but some of the trainings do have experiential components to them. So that just sort of varies from trainer to trainer. Right now we're having sort of a combination of in-person and virtual training. Last year it was all virtual, but the trainees have expressed a level of comfort at coming in and doing some trainings that are in person. So right now we're asking the trainer if they feel their training would be more effective in person or virtually, what they feel comfortable with and what they want to do. So there's a mix right now of virtual and in person. And when putting the training calendar together, I'm really looking at 4 different areas. One area is sort of the nuts and bolts trainings that you would get at any agency, like intake assessment, crisis intervention, group therapy, trauma-informed clinical care, these sort of like nuts and bolts basic trainings. Another area would be, because we don't have an overarching theoretical orientation, there's sort of like surveys into different ways of working with clients, formulating cases, and implementing interventions. An example of that would be right now, the trainees are taking part in a 2-part internal family systems training. We have a training on countertransference and case conceptualization. So those type of trainings have different theoretical lenses over them. Then social justice oriented trainings, like we have a training on cultural humility and implicit bias. We have a training on anti-oppression, so trainings that fall into that category. And then trainings about working with communities within the queer community. That could be gender affirming clinical care. It could be working with polyamorous and non-traditional relationships. It could be, we've got intersex 101 training that we offer every year. Disability justice, which kind of is a cross between the two, social justice and communities within the queer community training categories. So those are some examples of categories that I'm thinking about when I'm putting the training calendar together from year to year. In the second half of the training year, one of our trainings, like every practicum student does a peer presentation on a client for the group where they get feedback and support from their fellow practicum students. So that happens in the new year in the second half of the practicum year. We are small, and our administration wing of our agency is also very small, and we're all working kind of different positions. So folks who tend to be pretty independent, folks who are self-starters, and individuals, if they're having issues, they're not afraid to come to us and talk with us about issues that might be coming up for them so that we can work to remedy those issues, I'd say tend to fare better at Queer Life Space. We give our practicum students a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom. And for some practicum students, that can feel overwhelming, and they might feel like they need a bit more scaffolding within the practicum site. And for those students, I might say that we might feel overwhelming to them, or they might get frustrated with us. Also, practicum students who have an open mind to learning a lot of different types of theoretical models and intervention techniques, as opposed to wanting a deep dive into any one particular theoretical model, tend to fare better, because it's just not the way that we're set up and organized. What else? Certainly a passion for working with the queer community, and some knowledge of the queer community, I would say, is also quite helpful in working at Queer Life Space, because a lot of our clients are pretty sophisticated around community related issues and issues of intersectionality and diversity. So some knowledge of that as well. I would say, around issues of diversity and inclusion, it's something that we're always working to improve upon. Our administrative wing of our agency is not as diverse as we want it to be, and we want that reflected in all areas of our agency. Sometimes, Also around in our board too, we really need to have more diversity on our board as well. So that's something that we're very aware of and something that we're trying to remedy. It's harder to change some of those administrative structures, or it takes a lot longer to be able to do that. Where I've been able to have a bit more luck is around supervisors and trainers, and incorporating more diversity inclusion in those areas of agency involvement. And then, of course, pairing them up with folks that we're bringing in as trainees or associates, and then keeping that in mind in terms of what we need in terms of services to our client base. But it's a real, it's a challenge to be able to be as representative as we want to be. And it's so important for our agency with the demographics that we serve. And it's also a field that tends to be not incredibly inclusive or diverse. And I think that that's something that's changing over time, but it's a slow process. And I think that that process is reflected in the way that we're able to change. And I think that that can be frustrating. There's a desire for change to happen more quickly, and on a lot of different levels. And so that's something that we are aware of and are trying to be patient with ourselves around as we work to improve issues around inclusivity and diversity. Other areas of frustration might be, we're pretty informal. We don't have a super hierarchical structure. And I think that sometimes students come in and sort of expect this type of structure in a nonprofit, and that's not really the way that we're created. So that can be frustrating. Some students really like that and find that liberating, and some students find that more frustrating. So those would be a couple of areas where I've seen students get frustrated with us. We're small, we're informal. There's a very familial feeling and a level of closeness that the practicum students, the bonds they tend to form are very close. And this was even true of our cohort last year that had very minimal in-person contact with each other. We really like to really get to know the practicum students that we have coming in, joining us. We like to have, little events, whether that's like a lunch or a dinner here or there. We have like a holiday party every year. Last year it was virtual. This year I think we'll be able to do it in person. But through having these type of kind of social building interactions, we really create and perpetuate that familial feeling, and that's really important to us. And I feel that that carries into the safe community space that we're creating for clients as well. So that's just an important part of the culture at Queer Life Space, and I feel like it's important to just mention and highlight that.